Thanks everyone for coming. So this is really meant to be not a tutorial, not a full in-depth discussion of all the complicated things that you can do, but really is just trying to be a refresher on some basic functions, let everyone kind of know some of the options that are available for things that you can do in Excel, how you can do things maybe a little bit faster, how can you use it as a tool to understand your data a little bit better and sort of navigate it a little bit better. If you have any questions, let me actually go to my slide that says this. We're not going to do data entry or formatting because there's just too much stuff to do and a lot of that's subjective anyways. If you have any questions or if you think that the way I'm doing it is the absolute worst way, please feel free to pipe in. I may ask you to come up and demonstrate it. So, you know, be ready to support what you're asserting. Also, if you have your phone or if you're online and you have a question or a tip or whatever else that you want to share, feel free to put it in the comments if you don't feel like I don't want to interrupt right now. I'll try to check in with the comments and occasionally, or somebody else might check them while we're doing them. And that way we can, especially if you have additional tips or anything else, or this wasn't covered very well, put it in the chat and everyone can benefit from it. If you don't know me already, I'm Dan Howard. I'm, I've been an architect here for a long time, and in the last couple of years, I've become a computational designer, meaning that I like to do automation and data and find more efficient ways to do things. And I like learning how to do shortcuts and doing things faster. So I'm trying to just share some of the things I've learned in this presentation, some of the things other people have told me. I've asked a couple of people like, hey, what's the best thing you know about Excel over the last month or two? If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. And after the presentation, if you have anything that you want to talk to me about, like a cool problem on your project, anything about data or data visualizations, I'm not going to go into charts and graphs today because there's too much to do on that. But I love charts and graphs, and I love extra tools for doing charts and graphs. Automations, coding, anything else, come talk to me. I'd love to talk to you about it. Again, I'm not an Excel expert. I'm just trying to share a little bit of what I know. And you probably know how to do things in Excel that I don't, or know how to do stuff better. So again, please feel free to chime in or post it in the chat for the meeting. We are also recording the meeting, so we'll make this available afterwards. And if you have the chat up, I posted a link to my little cheat sheet that I've made on things that you can do in Excel, and I will post that again later. And I'll be updating that as I get new tips and as I fill out more things. And honestly, there's parts of this just aren't complete anyways. So our agenda for today is to start off talking about autofill, which is one of your best friends in Excel, how to use keyboard shortcuts to navigate and select things efficiently, formulas and functions, relative and absolute addressing, which are really great once you start, when you have some complicated tables that are referencing other cells, learning how to do absolute referencing, and then especially named cells and ranges will, I think, be really awesome. People are going to really like that. I'll try to get into some conditional formatting. That can get really complicated, but it's pretty interesting. And pivot tables. Katie Brophy was supposed to be co-presenting with me and doing pivot tables because she's honestly much better about them than I am. But she had a meeting today, so she couldn't make it. So again, if anyone really loves pivot tables and want to present that part, feel free to jump up. Okay, let's go to Excel. All right, any questions before I get started? All right, great. All right. So autofill, one of your best friends in Excel is autofill. You can, the first thing to know about it is if you have some value and you just want to repeat it, you can grab the little corner of the cell and drag it down, and it just repeats that and fills it in. What's actually more powerful is when you have a series and you want to continue that series. If you grab the first two items of that series, there we go. Okay, so it will continue. Thanks. It'll continue your series. Okay, there we go. Other types of things that you can autofill is names, dates, days of the week, months, times. So if you have a pattern for any of those, you can fill those in. If you do have something with like fractional formatting, that again will also will also continue down. There we go. So you can add in all those things. The other thing to know about autofill is that you can add in custom lists. So if you have something that you're using to autofill, and let's say it's a repeating series, you can enter that in as a custom list, and then it will autofill that in. So if there's a whole series that you want to do, that also works for custom. Excuse me, custom lists are good for when you have specialized sorting. So let's say that you have departmental names that are not in alphabetical order, but you always want them to be represented in a specific order. You can make a custom list for that, and it will, when you do sorting, it will auto do those things. So if we want to do a custom list, we go to File, go down to Options, and under the Advanced area, we can scroll down till we get down to this general area. It says Edit Custom Lists, and you can put in whatever you want in here. So I'm going to say Add a New List, and I'm going to say, you know, Dan, Marissa, Julia, Sam, that's my family, and add those. And now if I start typing in Dan, I should be able to, again, come on, drag those down and it'll just add those things in, okay? And again, if you want it to be in, it'll treat that as a new sort of alphabetical order for you if you want to sort by that, something like that. This works for doing things both dragging horizontally and vertically. You can do entire ranges. So if you select this entire thing and want to do it, you can do that entire thing at once. And again, double clicking on the lower right corner of the cell will do it for you. Another option that you can do is if you right click and drag, and go right click and drag. It'll then give you an option to how you want to do it. If it's something like a numeric value, that it could be either like an addition or subtraction, or it could be like a growth rate or something like that. If you're doing financial calculations, you'd use things like growth rates a lot. You can fill that in. You can also do things like use it to fill without formatting or just copy the things out. So right click and drag to have additional options when you're autofilling down. Any questions on any of that so far? What's that? I don't know, let's find out. It just repeats it. Yeah. If you don't, also, if you have something that is like not defined as a custom list, let's just say you have like AB, and you would think that AB, if you'd autofill down, would do C. It doesn't, just repeats AB, AB, AB. So if you define then a custom list of A, B, C, D, E, etc., then it will do it. But if you just have like a non-numeric pattern, it'll just repeat that exact pattern rather than continuing on. Yeah.
How come in like the pattern switched over to like pound symbols, 5 feet?
So anytime that the cell overflows the width of the thing, it gives you that, especially with numbers. So like it, rather than showing you a number that is like, if it just showed 1 on there, you might think, oh, that's only a value of 1, but really it's 11, but it just got cut off, right? So if the number is too big to fit in the cell, then you can just make it bigger and it will show the whole thing. All right. Okay, next, a couple of keyboard shortcuts. And actually, should have grabbed my like regular size computer, my regular size keyboard for this. So if you want to move to the first cell of a range, you can hit the home button, and I'm sorry, this is where not having a full-size keyboard is a problem. If you hit the home button, it'll go to the first cell in the range. If you hit Control and Home, it'll go to the very first cell of the entire worksheet. If you hit Control and End, it'll go to the very last cell, the bottom right, farthest down you can possibly go with any, the size of the data that you have. You can do like millions of rows in Excel, and it won't go the whole way down. It'll only just go for like however big your area is. What I actually like a little bit more is using Control and the arrow keys. So to quickly navigate around. So if you hit Control and an arrow key, it will jump over to the next cell that either is unfilled or the end of your filled range, or to wherever it changes from filled to unfilled. So you can very quickly navigate around like this, just using your arrow keys. If you hold down Shift while you're doing that, then it will select that entire range. And again, if you hit Control Shift and hit down, now you've selected your entire area like that. So it's very, very quickly, if you want to select the entire sheet or just a certain portion of the sheet where your data is, you can use that selection feature to grab just that area. If you do want to select the entire sheet, Control A. Control A selects the entire sheet. If you hit Control Shift asterisk, and again, this is all on the cheat sheet, so you don't have to try to remember this. Control Shift asterisk selects the entire range. So whatever volume your current set of data does, from any cell in there, it'll grab the whole thing. And if you do have some like arbitrary amount that you want, so I don't want this entire thing, but I just want down to this cell here, hold down Shift and select the bottom right corner, and it'll just select that entire area. If you use the F keys on the top of your keyboard, if you hit F8, it might be a little hard to see, but down here at the bottom of the screen, at the bottom of Excel, it says now extend selection. So now I'm not holding down any other keys, but I'm just using the arrow keys, and it's adding to that set. So if you want to just one cell at a time, one row at a time, add your selection, you can use the extend selection. And if you use Shift F8, then it will add to add or remove selection. And so you can add individual cells to that. So let's say that you're doing something where you want to format a bunch of things in disparate places all at one time. You can add those individual things to your selection without having to hold down the Control key or anything like that. And if you hit Escape or just hit F8 again, it'll get rid of that. Questions? Anybody have any hot tips on selecting anything you want to share? All right, fantastic. Okay, formulas and functions. This is when I think things actually start to get fun. So if you don't know, I think probably everyone knows that you can use Excel to perform calculations for you. So if you just select a cell and hit equals and start typing in, you can add things in there. So you can say 5 plus 5, and obviously that equals 10 right there. But you can also do things like add together different cells. So I can say this plus this plus this, and now that tells me what those things are. I could do, equals 21 divided by 39, etc. Shows me that calculation. So any of your basic math things you can do in that. And this is it's referencing the actual cell. So if for whatever reason you change what the value is in these cells, so 55, now my value there has changed. If you once you have that formula in a cell, you can then use autofill to complete that, continue to add that same function down into adjacent cells. You'll notice here that this is giving me a divide by 0 error. That's because when I set this up, I picked one of these cells, and once it got down below that, because it's trying to maintain the relationship spatially to that, now there's no value in that cell. So it's trying to divide a cell by 0. So it's giving me an error here. And again, all the rules for autofill work for all those things. If you double click it, it'll start to fill that entire formula down into there. Basic functions. Actually, I'm going to skip around in my list a little bit. If you do have, let's say that over here I have some departmental grossing factor. So I'm going to say this is my departmental grossing factor is 1.25 here. All right. And let's say that these are all areas over here, and I want to know what my departmental gross is times times this factor. So I can say equals this times this. But if I go to autofill this down, it's going to say 0 here because this is now trying to reference this cell over here because I autofilled it down and there's nothing in this cell. So what you want to start to do is instead of using just the regular cell address, you can start to use absolute addressing, which is when you put a $sign in front of either the column, the row, or both. Okay. So if I put in a $sign before 0 and 2 here, hit enter. I'm sorry, if yeah, here. And now when I autofill, it is not going to update that that reference as it goes down. So the next column is still going to reference the next one down over here for the first part of that formula, but it'll maintain this connection over to this cell here. If you want to know what cells are being referred to in your formulas, a couple of things you can do. If you go to the formulas tab, you can say show formulas, and it makes all of your cells a little bit bigger. But you can go over here and now it tells you exactly what your formula is. So if you receive a Excel file from somebody and you think it has a bunch of calculations in there, you can use this to see, like, just show me where all the calculated things are, right? And I want to see like what they're doing. I can see them really quickly by using this show formulas. And if you uncheck it, it'll turn back off. The other really cool thing is these two options right here, trace precedence and traced dependence. So if I say trace precedence, it puts an arrow on here that shows me exactly which cells it's referring to when it is grabbing that formula. And I can add this for a bunch of different ones. And when I want to remove those, I can click this remove arrows button and it just gets rid of all of those. Or if the formula is not in this cell, but other cells are referring to this, you can hit the trace dependence. And now it's showing you that all of these cells use that cell in a formula, right? So that helps you know that if you delete this, it's going to cause problems with something else, right? You can also, if you have a set of values on another sheet, so let's say department grossing factor is 1.25 here, and I'm going to just rename this sheet to data. All right. Get rid of all my arrows. I can actually say that instead of referring to a cell on this sheet, I can type in the sheet name. So this is data, and then I hit an exclamation point and then put in the cell reference. So I think that was, when you look at that, that was B2. This times data, exclamation point, B2, hit enter. And now, again, it updates that. And again, if I change this to something crazy, 5, now you can see it's updated that. Again, the same issues with if I were to drag this down now, it's going to give me a bunch of zeros because I haven't given an absolute address to that. So if I wanted to change that, again, I could just add in a $sign before either the column or the row and say, okay, we go back to this, change back to 1.25. And again, now when
either the column or the row, if you did both.
So if you, this is useful for when, like, let's say that in column B here, these are the areas that I want to apply. You know, I want to use as the baseline numbers. Okay. And let's say sometimes I want to multiply them by 1.25 and sometimes 1.5. Okay. So if I go in here and say equals this times 1.25, if I were to drag this over to here, it's now going to reference this column C instead of the column B. So if I put the $sign in front of the column, actually, you can build it over here. If I put the $sign in front of the column, $sign B4, now when I drag it over, it is going to maintain just the column, right? But when I drag it down, it'll update all the rows. So now this is still referring to the first column, B4. This one is also referring to B4. But as I move down a row, now it's going to the next one. So if you put it in front of the column, it will keep that column designation the same. If you put it in front of the row, it'll keep the row designation the same. If you put it in front of both, it'll say this absolute cell, don't go anywhere else. Okay. Good. Yes. To get the arrows on the formulas tab, you have these, there's this formula auditing thing. You can say trace precedence or trace dependence. So if I do trace dependence, because this was filled down, actually, sorry, what's interesting here is that I didn't use, I didn't put in my absolute column for here, so I can put in $sign on the 3 there. And that's just, I'm going to make these bold just so I know those are the ones that I'm calculating by. So now I put the $sign on the 3 here. And so now when I fill this down, it's always going to refer to this 1.25. But again, when I drag it over here, now it's going to N3. So now it is kept, it's looking for the column that I'm already in, but staying on that same row. Again, if I drag this down here, right? So when I hit the trace precedence on here, it's going up to that top column there, and the one over here. If I go over here, same thing, right? So it's keeping those relative those absolute references correct.
Does the trace work across 2 different sheets like you did with those?
It does, yeah, it does. So if I do this as times data exclamation point B2. Now when I hit this trace precedence, you'll see that it has this dashed arrow and it goes to this other thing. If you double click on that, it'll say go to. You can say okay, and it takes you over to that location. So if you're referencing things across many different sheets, you can use that to quickly navigate between them.
Just if you're typing in the formula, you don't have to, you can just go select it, you just go to that tab.
Say again?
So when you're typing in the formula,
Yeah.
you don't have to put in data exclamation point, the other cell, you can just select it now. Yeah, back.
So if I just go over to here,
Tab, yeah, you can just.
and I'll do that. Yeah, you're right, absolutely. So yeah, you don't have to type it in if you can navigate to that sheet.
Yeah, there's another way. I mean, if you just click in that field up at the top, the FX, you can just see it highlights the cells that are related to that formula.
So if I so again hit here,
In the white part of the bar. Yeah, right there.
I'm sorry.
Yep, right there.
Oh yeah, when you click on the formula, it shows you what it's doing. The nice thing about the arrows is just that like you can keep them on there if you want. So like if you're trying to see like I want to see this and this, or if it's going to another sheet, it'll highlight that it's going to another sheet for it.
One other trick is if when you're editing that formula and you click in that menu bar, you can go grab those colored boxes and shift them over to a different cell.
Yeah.
Like in sort of a graphical way, like, oh no, this is the cell that I want to
Yeah. Yeah, so if you are referencing that other cell, I click here, I can drag this. Oops. Yeah. Take James's word for it that it works.
Is there a shortcut for adding the $signs, the absolutes?
Yes, there is. So if you, let me do equals this, all right. If you hit F4, it'll cycle through all the different options. So I don't know if it's easy to see on here. Let me actually equals this. If you hit F4, it'll start off adding both of them, or it'll cycle through just the column, just the row. So you can change it between all the different options just by doing that. So if that's easier than if you're like typing stuff and you want to just hit the $signs, do that. If it's easier to hit F4, then do that. The one thing to know about using the F4 is that once you go on to something else, plus 5, 5. If you try to hit F4 again, it will not do anything because now your cursor is next to something else. So your cursor has to be at the cell reference in order for it to cycle through those options. Okay. The other really cool thing is that if you have a bunch of values that you know you're going to be referencing all the time, and especially in lots of different formulas, you can actually name an individual cell, and then you can refer to just that name. So let's say that, again, I've put my, oh, and if you want to zoom in really quick, hold down Control and use your mouse wheel so you can zoom in and out really quickly, make things bigger. If you click in this box to the left side, the lower left side of the ribbon, where it has the cell address name in it, you can type in a name here. So I can say DGF_factor. And now if I go to do something else, I can say equals DGF, GF, and you can see that in my autofill down here, it tries to guess what you're trying to do. That's now an option here. If I hit tab, it'll autocomplete that, and now it just has in DGF factor and refers to that. So the nice thing about that is that if you have values where you know what it means to you, right? If it's like, if you're doing life safety calculations and it is the rate that you're multiplying spaces for occupancy of assembly versus, versus business, you can say assembly factor, business factor, and refer to those like that. And then you don't have to, it doesn't matter what sheet they're on, what address they're on, it just knows where that thing is. That also really helps if somebody else inherits your spreadsheet, that it can give them a name that actually means something rather than just a location, right? That also works. We'll get into tables in a minute. Yeah.
Can you also still reference it, like E2?
I think so, yeah. I haven't tried it, but I would assume that you can. Yeah. Although I feel like if you have a name for it, like, I don't know why you would want to refer to it just by its like address instead of its name.
Like if
But
you named it halfway through making the sheet or something and somebody else still referenced it, would it update that?
so if you named it, if you originally said like B5 and then you changed B5 to be gross factor, I don't know. Good question.
I don't know this for sure, but my hunch is that you can still reference it by the original address.
Yeah.
But if it, or there's a way once you name the cell, you can go into the properties of that name range, change what that name refers to, and that name range is the old addresses that is a hard code to B2, they say it is B2.
Yeah.
But if I modify that name range and say this now is A1, and if it's a name range, but it gets that name cell, it can still be hard code is B2.
Yeah, I think that may be true. Yeah. If you want to know just what everything is, if we go to, gotta find it. Name Manager under the Formulas tab. If you go to Name Manager, it'll tell you what all of your named ranges and cells are here, and you can update them here. So if for whatever reason you're trying to keep track of all your different things, you can see where exactly it refers to it using the Name Manager. So the other thing you can do is you can name an entire range. So I've selected this entire thing. I can just say, just gonna call this the data, right? So now if I want to do some function, let's say sum on the data, I can just type that name in and it does it for that entire range. This is not going to work because obviously there's like text and things in here, so sum is not going to work for that. But that is an option. And when we get into tables and things in a minute, we'll use that same kind of convention in doing tables. Any questions before I move on to functions, formulas more? Okay. So Excel, other than just basic arithmetic, there's a bunch of functions that you can use in Excel. I started to show one of them a second ago, which was the sum. So you can start typing equals sum, add a parentheses, and you can just select an entire range. So you can either do individual cells separated by commas, or select an entire range, a multi-column range, et cetera, or whatever you want. You can do that, and now it adds that thing up. There are tons of different functions. They all do different things. Some of the most common ones that you may use are obviously sum, average, count. So count just says how many cells is it? I don't want to know what the sum of all those cells is. I just want to know how many there are. So if you're like counting the number of doors in your door schedule, right? You can use the count function for that. Max and min shows you what the biggest and smallest values are in your range. There's also a lot of conditional versions of those, which are like sum if. So if you have something where it's like, I only want to add this value to the total if some other condition is met. So let's say the door name is whatever, hollow metal. You can sum up those things just based on that other condition. I'm not going to go into how you actually do that because to be honest, I'd probably get it wrong right now anyways, but you can look it up online. And actually, in fact, I highly recommend if you're ever doing these functions and you just can't get it right, ChatGPT does a great job of writing Excel functions for you. Or any other kind of like function or code or whatever else. So some of the more interesting things get in when you start to add in some additional logic. So if I wanted to only do certain things to a formula, let's say that let's say that I want to, I don't know why I would do this, but let's say I want to add 10 to this, but only if it's greater than a certain amount, right? If it's greater than 50, then I want to add 10, and if not, then I'm just going to leave it alone. So I can use the if function. So I type in if, let me actually scroll over a little bit here. If parenthesis. Also, whenever you start typing in a function, Excel will tell you what the arguments, so the things that go inside the parentheses are called arguments. It'll tell you what the arguments are supposed to be. So this first one says logical test. So I'm going to say if m is greater than 10, I put in a comma, and then I say, what do I want to do if that's true? I want to say, I want to do M4 plus 10, or I want to M4 plus or whatever, 20. And if it's false, then I want to do this minus 55. Doesn't matter what it is, okay? And now it'll apply that logic to any of these. Let's change this to 9. So now instead of, now because I changed this value and now it's less than 10, now it's doing a different thing, right? And you can combine these things together. So if a certain value, if a logical test is true for one thing, then do this function. And if it's not true, then do this other function. It also works for text and things like that. So if you want to like say if this value is greater than 5, let's see, let's try this. So if this is greater than 10, then I want to say that this is big. And if it is less than 10, I wanted to say it is little. Now this one is little. As I scroll down through these, oops, autofill these down. The rest of those are big, right? So if you want to just like check a couple of things, you can do that and have it write out a response for you. So if you're trying to do like, does this door have a card reader? And so you're checking the card reader column to see if it has a value there, then it can write in text for you for like that. There's also functions like and, or not. So and will say that you can put in a bunch of logical tests. So if this is true, and this is true, and this is true, then do this, right? If it does or, then if any of these logical tests are true, then the entire thing is true, and so then go do something else. Not just says, if this is true, then my actual value is false, right? So if your thing is, if you're checking a text field to say, does this contain HM? So I'm looking for hollow metal. So I can say contains HM, and I can say not, and that will say anytime that does have HM, then it will give me a false value instead of a true value, right? So that's useful sometimes for when you want to structure your logic in a certain way. Questions? Anything? All right. All right, I'm going to switch over to a different example. Actually, I'm going to very quickly show how you can bring in data from different sources. So obviously, if you already have an Excel file, you can just copy and paste stuff. If you have an Excel file that you want to reference into something else, you can go to the data tab and say get data from file, and you can choose from a bunch of different options. So from Excel workbook, and I have, I'm just gonna, that file's too big. Let me choose something else. So I can insert the data from a different Excel file. So that's nice if you want to use a separate file as like a reference that you're constantly replacing. So you don't want to have your calculations and your summaries and things like that in your actual data file, because it's going to get replaced from somebody else, right? Your consultant's going to send you a new version of that, but you want to do calculations. You can reference it into your workbook, and then whenever you update it, you can just hit refresh on that. So I'm going to say I want my, I want to use this source from that thing, say load it. And now if I ever if that file gets replaced, I can just come here and hit refresh, and it will refresh that data with the latest thing from the source file. The other thing where that's really nice is if you ever get a text file or like a CSV file from either an export out of another program. So like, let's say you want to save your schedule from Revit. It comes out as a text file that is usually tab or comma delimited, meaning it puts a tab or a comma between the different values of each cells. It just comes out as a text file. You can insert that. If you do just double click on, so like here's this CSV file that I was working on for something else. If you just double click on it, Excel will open it, but it will try to auto format everything for you. So it'll come in with all these things like this. And I'm not seeing where it would be, but if you had something like room numbers, and sometimes your room number is 0-100, Excel thinks that's just the number 100 and not a identifier. So it's going to take off that first 0. And so now all of a sudden all of your room numbers or your door numbers are the wrong length. They're not 4 digits, they're only 1 or 2 or 3 digits, right? So if you want to avoid that, instead of just double clicking on the file, you can go to insert data from text or CSV, pick the file. And the nice thing about that is that it gives you, it brings up an extra set of options before you import the data. So I can hit this transform data button right here. And you can see on this, this is like a query editor. You can see up here in the header of the column that it gives you a preview of what the data type is. So like in this one, for instance, it's showing me this 1, 2, 3, and over here it's showing ABC. This 1, 2, 3 means it's a number. And if I wanted that actually to be like a room number instead of like a size or something like that, I would want to right click on this and say change type to text. And I'm just going to replace the current thing. You can see it shifted over to the left side because now it's text instead of a number. The key thing to remember with that, if you ever are dealing with this and you want to know, should this be a number or should this be text? If you can do math on it, it's a number. If you're just using it to refer to something, it's text. So even if it only has numbers in it, if it's room number 100, that's not a number, that's text, okay? Because you're never going to do math on the number 100, right? I can hit close and load here, and now it actually brings it in as a table with all the data in there. It has some default formatting in that, so it's a little bit nicer than just my all collapsed version when I double clicked on the file, and I can start to do things with this. And again, it keeps, especially if you have dates or IDs or whatever else, it'll help you set the format for those, and you won't lose any data on the import. Now that we have a table, let me actually go back to my, actually I'm going to double click on this to show sort of like just some raw data that's not already in a table. Filtering and tables. So if we select our entire set of data, and we go over here to the filter, sort and filter button and say filter up here, this will, if I go back up to the top now, it's not liking. You'll see now that each of these columns of the top row has a little arrow in it, and I can click on that. And now it's showing me options for all the different values that are in there, right? So if I only want to show certain things, let's say I only want to see things on the, I'm going to undo this and do it for the whole table just to make sure I get everything. Okay, yep. So if I want to only see whatever this is on a certain level, I can just check on just that level. And now it has filtered all of that to only show me that level, right? Filters are really useful. You can filter by multiple things at a time. You can also use these to sort your data. That means it's not showing all the data, but it's still letting you play around with it and represent it the way you want. So if I want to also do, only do things that have Venturi in it, I can type in for search for Venturi, and now it's only showing me these Venturi valves. So now I've very quickly gotten to a table or to a worksheet that's only showing me Venturi valves on the first floor, right? So I can quickly look at everything that's going on there. One thing I'd like to recommend for everyone, if you do start to use either for tables or filters, is that when you do make these things, just take a couple seconds to do these sort of the filters, but then also sort by different things. If you notice that, come on. And my lack of mouse precision is killing me. All right. So now it's sorted by all of these different sizes here. You may notice when you look around to other cells, other columns that are not the one that you sorted by, it'll now really highlight to you when you have different values in there. So even though this name is 10-inch Venturi valve, on some other schedule that I was looking at, it's probably not in this one, it showed the diameter. And when I did that, it actually showed me that the diameter for one of them was listed as 8 inches, even though the actual family said it was 10 inches, right? So you can very quickly sort things and get a sense of like, do I have any inconsistencies in my data? If you're doing a door schedule, you can sort by what type of door it is, the frame type, the panel type. And then because it's grouping all those things together, it's going to highlight for you, you're going to see it really quickly when there's an inconsistent value between those things. So all of your hollow metal doors are, 7'10", and you group it by that, and all of a sudden you see one that's 8'0". All right, now I need to check that door. Is that really supposed to be 8'0", or is that supposed to be, is that one unique door that did somebody put it in wrong, right? Yeah.
You could also actually highlight.
Yes. Yes, with conditional formatting, you can also highlight when things are different. You can, I might come back to that if we have time. We only have about 10 minutes left. I could probably keep going for another like 45 minutes. But is there any questions? I'm going to stop right now. Just like, does anybody have questions or anything else that they're like, want to share, want to know more about, etc.?
I have an observation that maybe you can expand on. In this example, it looks like you just have one piece of data in each row, each column. Can you talk about why that's important?
Yeah, so if you if you're doing an Excel file that is just for yourself, just I want a quick table for presentation, don't worry about this too much. But as you start to get into more actually like working on your data and trying to use it for other things, it's really important that you try to keep your worksheets as clean as possible, meaning that every row in your worksheet represents the same type of thing. So if it's a door, every row is a door. When you get down to the bottom, if you want to do like a subtotal for something, what's the total cost of everything? If you add that in there, now there is a row that is not a door. And if I go to write a script for it or something like that, and I don't already know that there's a row in there that is not a door, my script is going to fail because it's not treating it the same. Or if you go to like hide rows or hide columns, whatever else, you may be hiding things that are not strictly the exact same type of data that was represented in your main table. And so you're going to lose out on things. So as much as you can, try to keep your data so that everything is consistently formatted and all in one thing. And only if you want to do like subtotals or, you know, heading lines that are kind of interspersed in your thing, do that in a separate worksheet that refers to the data on your worksheet. Or just know that like from a pure data standpoint, that makes it challenging to work with. Mark, you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I just want to advocate for, we were talking about on-fill previously, just a flash bill that I've been using on, and basically Excel tries to guess if that's what your list is. So the example that I used, it's like, we get, we put our drawings together for instruments. What we do is we export, you know, like a red or sort of like this, like a list of drawings, but usually the drawing number is going to be kind of separate. And so what Flash Fill will do is if you like have a list of everything together, you can put just the drawing number, the drawing name in 2 separate cells, and then if you do it multiple times, Flash Fill will basically like start to understand, oh, like you're trying to separate these 2 values from this 1 cell. And so you can do it by, I mean, James would probably prefer to do it by the running formula that like calculates the number of characters and that stuff. The Flash Fill is really easy to use to help try to like separate stuff or do like really complicated Excel things. It's not perfect, but
There's also a whole bunch of functions that allow you to like extract different things out of text. So you can like, let's say you have somebody put in a whole bunch of things that are separated by commas. You can have it break that apart into individual components, or I only want the 3rd thing out of the list of all these things separated by commas, or I only want the characters that come before the hyphen, right? So there's functions that allow you to like manipulate text and just extract out parts that you want or combine things. So like you said, like if you have your drawing number in one cell and your drawing name in another cell, you can write a formula that says this, and then it's an ampersand plus the other thing, and it just squishes those together. And there's lots of other functions that do similar things like that. Any questions or comments online? Is there anybody on the chat that's added anything? I haven't been watching. Yeah.
I feel like if I was playing with it, I would figure it out, but you'd help me remember forever. Do you need to highlight the whole range of all your data before you sort? Like if you wanted to, I feel like there's a danger of sorting one column and the rest of the data not coming with it.
Yeah, so this is where the value of either using that filter thing is, or actually what I started to get into, and I didn't finish doing it, was instead of doing filters, you change this into a table. So I'm going to use this format as table. And if you have headers, you can check the option there for my table has headers. The nice thing about this, once it's either as a filtered range or as a table, and tables honestly are better, it always treats that as consistent data. So like if you sort it by 1 column, it's going to sort the entire thing by that. If you just choose sort, if you like have not a filtered range or not a table, and you select 1 column and hit sort on it, I feel like I've seen it where sometimes it sorts the other stuff nearby it, but it may not grab it. And especially like if it's in the middle of something else, it's not going to do the stuff below it, right? So if you have a table, if you have something that is all consistent data, that you're not just trying to sort like for some reason, just like this tiny section of it, you can sort that entire column, right? So tables, filtered ranges are like your best friend for actually doing any kind of sorting or trying to like parse your data, make sense of your data.
Yeah, I mean, that way, I just think problem, I think it will ask you if you want to just do that row or the things around it, you know, associated with it. Every time I try to include everything, I get error messages saying, you can't do that, you're gonna lose data.
Yeah.
Whatever, so yeah, it never really worked, so this is good, like, I didn't realize it, just.
Yeah. The other nice thing, I'll show you this real quick. So let's say that this one doesn't have any numbers in it. Let me find something with numbers in it. All right. So this is an example file that came with this book that I found in a free bin somewhere, but it's been awesome. It's about Excel for MBAs and analysts and things. Okay, so I'm going to make this into a table. I'm going to say, oh, you know what? Sorry. This file has like restrictions on it, so I can't do a bunch of stuff. But if I paste this data into here and I make this into a table, right? Now because that had headers on this thing knows that like this column is the thing is like a certain value. If I click anywhere in this table and I come up to this thing, I can say that this is actually my employee table, or just say employees, right? So now I've named that table, or sorry, I did in the wrong place. Up under table design, under here table name, employees. So now if I come over here and I want to, let's say, sum up all of the seniority for whatever reason, I can start to type in the name of that cell. So it's employees. I can come down here. It's already in the thing and it tabbed autocomplete. I put in brackets and and now it shows me all of the different columns that are in there. So I can click on seniority and again, hit tab, close my brackets, close my parentheses. And now it has summed all of that. And I didn't have to manually select the entire thing. So if you have like 1,000 rows of data, you don't want to drag the whole way down. It's already a table and it has a header for it. You can put it directly in the formula that I want to sum up all of the seniority for this table. Again, naming your tables and then having headers on there really allows you to make your functions make more sense when you come back to it later. What am I actually doing with this function? It tells me right in the name because I gave everything names, right? And you can do tons of like, you can do things like count the number of distinct things. So if I want to know, like in my list of, show me the number of different, like if I have an employee list, I can say, how many different departments are there, right? I don't then have to go through and check everything to say, here's all my different departments of where everyone works in the organization. I can have a formula that does that for me. There's tons of other things like that that lets you sort of like grab bits and pieces and analyze your data that way. Any other questions? And again, I am more than happy to sit here for another hour and work on anything for these things, but any questions, any other hot tips? Is anybody looking at the chat? Is there anything in the chat?
Dan, if there's somebody who's like curious about some of the things you're talking about, they don't have time to figure it out, can they just ask you?
Yes, absolutely. Please come ask me. I'm more than happy to help on any sort of like put a formula together, design a spreadsheet, whatever else. Like again, also Microsoft actually has really good documentation for this. Chat GPT and the other like AI, like chat bot things do a pretty good job of putting some of these things together too. So if you're just like, I can't get this thing to work, you can type it in there and it will give you a pretty good guess of how to put that in.
Can we do another day for the data table?
Yes, we can do Katie's thing that I completely neglected on another day. So pivot tables, just for anyone who doesn't know, a pivot table is a way to summarize all of your data. So if you have a really large amount of data, and let's say that you want to look at like, what is I have a list of all of my rooms and what departments they're in. I can use a pivot table to just put a single row in for each department and then add up all of the areas for it. So I can see, here's all of my areas for that. And it can allow you to like do it sequentially for like different types of categorization. So like, what's the total area of each type of room in a department? So I can see in the biology department, the sum total of all the offices is X square feet. The sum total of all the conference rooms is Y square feet. So it allows you to very quickly summarize all of your data that way, without having to manually like do individual calculations or, conditional statements or things like that. Cool. Thanks, everyone.